left out, although everyone tries to go along. So we talked first about that, about different methods that really do not bring dignity, that do not draw on the strength of people. And then the statement that kind of unlocked our discussion, I suppose, which was, that if you think that development, however you define development as an objective, the key is human dignity. That's the first thing to work with, at the individual level and at the collective level. Because once there's human dignity, actually that unlocks everything. Once there's people are in touch with who they are and what their self-worth and their feeling of power and capability, that actually anything's possible. That was the sort of unlocking thing. So we said, well, okay, so let's work on this human dignity issue. What would characterize it? What gives dignity? What is, if you're thinking in developmental context, what would bring dignity? And very quickly some words came. Work, service to others gives dignity, taking responsibility, respect for self, respect for each other, this creates an environment for dignity, and being able to express my identity, who I am, what I bring. Well, these are the, okay, we didn't try and be exhaustive and say, is there anything we're missing here? But we were able to sketch. Here's what we would think of as work with dignity, something that brings dignity. And that's what the characteristics even of dignity. So any method that we're looking for would have to bring these things into it. Any method for human dignity, any method for development, if you like. So we asked the question, okay, so what do we really need to do? How do we create the kind of environment for this to happen? And then Howard brought an interesting thing, saying, well, one of the things, before we look at what we create, is we need to remember that whatever we do, some capital is needed. There's something that you're starting with. And what capital is needed, and what's the cost of this capital? Because it's a finite thing that needs to that we're using, therefore we need to see how it gets enhanced, gets built, what's the cost of it? And how do we use capital but not be used by capital? That was the other thing. So thinking about that, we realized that immediately, there might be more than this, but immediately we could think of three kinds of capital. There's financial capital, the money to do things, which is what we normally think of as the capital. But then there's natural capital, the earth, the water, the air, what we have, what we were given to work with. And then socio-cultural capital, our strength as a people, our sense of who we are, the bonds that tie us, the bonds of trust, our history, our sense of what's possible, the way we celebrate, all of these things. This is a form of capital that we can work with. So that was the one kind of thread of our thinking, if you like, as we're looking for a method. And so we said with socio-cultural capital, we need to preserve it, we need to enhance it, we need to use it. It's something that is uniquely of whichever community we're working in, whichever locality we're from. Sorry, the word that I didn't use just now is that, which was an interesting thing when we talk about human dignity. Working on this at an individual and collective level enables the phrase that was used was endogenous development. It's from here. It's stuff that we think is needed. It's stuff that how we want to be and what we want to grow into. The idea of something that comes up from within a people, from a place, and from a situation, from a context. It's not something defined from, like, you guys need some education. It's rather what we are wanting. So that was the phrase associated with human dignity. And so we were exploring that. Someone brought this other discussion around what paralyzes development, what paralyzes the sense of human dignity is fear. And fear paralyzes and it polarizes. It stops bonds of trust, it breaks down social capital. And so the failure to deal with fear stops any developmental impulse. So we said, how do we deal with it? Say, actually, you deal with it in all parts of life, in every group. From earliest childhood, we need to pay explicit attention to dealing with that. This story yesterday of someone holding the baby on her breast, on her chest. That in families, amongst parents, in church groups, wherever, that we need to explicitly address this issue. And okay, fear is it's an easy term, but we can talk more what people meant by that. And then we came to the thing that it's easy that when we say, what do we do, and we list all these different settings, early childhood education, schools, community, then it's the government. This is what the government must do. And in fact, that when we do that and look to outsiders, we're really looking at the holders of financial capital. They've got the budget to put into this thing. They should sort it out. And we take away from ourselves the responsibility, but we also misreading what's needed to deal with that fear. It's not the money so much, it's the social cultural capital. We have the ability to deal with that, but we misread it time and again and think it's about donors, or it's about the private sector coming in and doing something here, or about the government having new policies. But actually where it starts is with us. We have that capability to deal with this fundamental issue. So, and once you start working on those issues, on the one side, creating this environment of where there can be work, service, responsibility, respect for each other, looking at how we do that, and taking responsibility for the areas of fear and worry, and so working with the positive and the negative aspect. Actually, people know exactly what they want to work on, what they want to do, how to do it, and you find that a lot of things are interconnected. People will very seldom choose one issue, orphans and vulnerable children, but they also choose nutrition, which means agriculture, which also that people understand that things are interconnected. So that's as far as we got on development method. Because remember, it was quite a short session actually. All of these that have given us so much rich discussion were quite short sessions. 3/4 of an hour, I think we had yesterday. So we got there, but it seemed to me that, in the Middle Ages, to describe God, you describe all the questions pointing to God, but never able to describe God because you couldn't see her or him. Yeah. So there would be all the questions, and by the question you define God. So I think we define development method in the same way. We put all of what needs to be there. And what the questions are around that without getting into the thing, therefore, here's a good development. Thank you.
I really see this as was a trigger for endogenous development, because it really showed the depressed people in Germany that some others are really taking them seriously and not just beating on them because they were the Germans. And I think this was exogenous, and it triggered a lot of endogenous development. I'm quite sure.
You can also see it at the level of corporate or business. You have some owners of the enterprises who hire people. They humiliate them, they expect them to work like machines. And when they are not there, the people stop. They don't continue. So they work as long as you are there. But when you insist on their dignity and you build within the company the spirit of high quality work, good service, the responsibility, teamwork, then people really try to achieve an objective from themselves, not what you are imposing them. You have in some companies, the business leaders who they want to have a financial result. That's what they want. And even if you die, even if you get sick, they don't care. So when you take into account the social-cultural dimension of the people, and you consider them as your best capital, then you put even resources to strengthen that capital by taking care of their health, you listen to them, etc.
I'd like to sort of focus that on the question how it starts. And I want to give a sort of Platonic answer. In Plato's dialogues, often where Socrates is the main character, there are quite a few dialogues between the sophists and Socrates, and between Thrasymachus and Socrates. And the question often comes up, well, what do people want? What are the goals of people? And what are the different trades and offices that make up a city? And sometimes the sophists will answer, or Thrasymachus will answer, well, really, there's only one trade, and that one trade is making money. And then Socrates says, no, it's not the case. There's the pilot who takes the ship into port safely, and then there's the medical doctor who cures diseases, and then there's the trainer who trains people in athletics, and then there's the people who are good at nutrition, they help people to eat the right foods, and there's the shepherd who takes care of sheep. They all have different things, and for every techne, that is for every art, there's an episteme, which is a type of knowledge, and it has its good, its agathon. So this, I think, is the historical root of the idea of vocation, that we're all called to serve in one way or another. And now, how did that sort of get lost? Well, I want to suggest two ways it got lost. I want to quote two authors on the point. One is, both of them are well known. One is Karl Marx, and the other is Milton Friedman. Karl Marx says at a certain point, well, you really can't blame the capitalist for all of this, because the capitalist really makes no decisions. The capitalist is simply the agent of capital. Capital is simply has a historical necessity to grow and expand, and the capitalist is simply the agent who carries out economic necessity by doing what has to be done to maximize profit. And he says literally, his soul is the soul of capital. In other words, the capitalist has no soul. The capitalist simply does what capital requires. Well, just about exactly 100 years later, Milton Friedman published his Essays on Positive Economics, and he begins by saying, what you must do is maximize profit. I think it's pretty well known that Milton Friedman is against social responsibility of business, because he says the only thing business does is maximize profit, it doesn't do anything else. And what's the reason? He says, well, you have to do that because you must do it, because you won't be in business for long if you don't. So he says exactly the same thing Marx said, namely, capital controls, people don't. Whoever you are, what you must do is follow those actions which maximize profit, which is exactly, literally the same concept. That there is only one agent active in the world, and that agent is capital, and that decides what must be done. What must be done is to maximize profit, and people simply follow the logic of that must be done. So I think, well, where did they go wrong? Well, I think one way they went wrong is in the conception of science. They think of science in a sort of Newtonian way. There's got to be a law that describes scientifically how things happen, which can be sort of mathematically expressed, and it tells the necessary course of events. I think if we're thinking in terms of dignity, a word with a long history, we're thinking of responsibility of agents who do many things. And I think we're talking about a development project. Someone else who I think so we got this pretty right was Peter Drucker. I want to quote Peter Drucker on this. He's talking mainly about, in fact, he's talking entirely about private sector business. But I think that what Drucker says is applicable also to cooperatives and public sector and nonprofits and other sectors. What Drucker says is, well, this is an article he published in the Journal of Business in the 1950s. He said, well, there have been many efforts to construct a science of management, but none of them are quite right. And now I, Peter Drucker, I'm going to start the real science of management. And the first thing we have to ask is, what does it take to have a business? And the answer is, first, you got to have a team, right? You got to have people. You got people who work together. If you don't have people who work together, then you can't possibly have business. And second, you got to have a project. You got to have some goods or services that you're going to offer to the public. Since there's just no point in having a business at all if it doesn't have the purpose of serving the public by providing some goods or services that the public wants and needs. I think that's a very fundamental point. So what Drucker is doing is he is introducing social responsibility not as a sort of add-on, an afterthought. At the very beginning, when you first start out, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to open a hamburger stand. Well, people want hamburgers. You're serving the public by providing hamburgers. But at the very beginning, when you start your project, there's no point in having the project if it's not going to be doing some social good. And he says, the people would never tolerate the existence of private business if it weren't the best way we know to provide goods and services for the people. And so the very fact that we have this social institution means it's doing something, and it starts out doing something, rather than... and then he adds a couple of other things. And then last he says, you've got to have capital. You've got to have money. And you've got to get a decent return on the capital. So you've got to compensate for it. You've got to be able to take risks. If you're going to take a risk, you've got to have the sort of capital to take the risks with. So, and this vision, I think, fits in with the idea of cost of capital, which was developed by John Maynard Keynes. I think that's very important. I think it's very important to think of a world in which different people do different things for different reasons, where we have many different types of initiatives in neighborhoods, governments, between governments, charitable organizations, all sorts of things people decide to do for lots of good reasons in many different ways. So the world is full of many agents with many projects which are serving the common good in different ways, and one thing they have in common is they all need resources to do it with. So we then have a model where once we've got our team, once we've got our mission, we say, well, what's the cost of capital, right? And well, we can apply to government agencies, we can try to raise money in capital markets, we can try to go to friends, families, and fools to support us. Or we can, as many sort of community organizations in Chile are always running a raffle, always running sort of a lottery to try to raise a little money. Or in our parish, we're always having a supper where we charge so much for a dinner to raise money to buy something for the vestry. So, or you can, say you decide in our neighborhood, as we did decide, well, we've got to have something for the young people to do, because the young people are just sitting around doing nothing and are going to get into bad habits. So we're going to organize a soccer team. Well, okay, so we get a local company to donate the shirts for the soccer team. We have one of our neighborhood guys, he's a policeman when he's on duty, but often he's going to be the coach. And he's going to donate his time to be the coach. We're going to charge admission to our games. We're going to charge dues to be a member of the soccer club. And maybe the city is going to contribute a little money. So we put together a sort of hybrid financing to do our mission. But the mission comes first. The point is the mission. And the resources then come together to do it. So this is sort of a way to carry out what I think was Drucker's concept of business, is you've got a mission, and then you use the capital you need to carry out the mission. The mission is not simply capital multiplying itself just for the sake of making more capital, as the two thinkers which I've mentioned said was the scientific way to look at it.
But again, the interest of putting the human dignity at the center of your business, and compared.
The mission of the business is some kind of service.
Because if you compare.
Sometimes one of the good things I think about recent mission statements is the concept of shared value. For example, Nestle, and it's trying to make up for me, it's many cents. Nestle now in its mission statement sort of includes the sort of creating well-paying jobs for its employees as an objective. So it used to be, back in the old days when you talk about business, you say, well, you have to create value for your owners, and you're just an agent of the owner. And the only thing you do is you give the owner the maximum benefit. And then everything you pay the employees is a cost. But Nestle has now rewritten that, well, with a little help of Michael Porter and Harvard Business School and a bunch of other people. Many corporations are rewriting it. So now, when they reward their people, the executives and the workers and everybody down the line, and when they serve their community, that's creating value. They're creating value for all of the stakeholders in the business. So in a way, it's the same. They take in a certain amount of money, and then it's divided up among various people. But now, instead of saying the only thing that really counts is how much the stockholders get, we're saying that among our values is a decent return on capital to reward all the pension funds who have invested in our business. And then, but we're also, when we pay our employees well, and when we send them on courses to learn things, and we have safe working conditions, that's fulfilling our mission. See, we're doing what we intend to do when we started out in business, when we do it that way.
And in fact, I think the biggest problem for NGOs is the fact that they model themselves so much on businesses, and they model themselves on a set of assumptions about growth and impact, which says, well, we're doing really good work, and if we really want to have more impact, what we need to do is expand. In order to expand, we need more money. In order to get more money, we need to make more compromises. But it's historically what's always happened, because actually in the UK, when the first so-called overseas aid agencies sort of came out of the Second World War, and it was Oxfam and Christian Aid and all these development agencies, and then very quickly you had the first sort of African statements of independence. And those statements of independence directly had a message to the West, which was, what you need, we don't want your aid, and we don't want your charity. We want you to tackle your governments about their structures and their politics. But the NGOs were saying, but you know, that's actually, we're not going to be very popular if we get into those debates. And actually, if we really want to raise money, what we have to do is sort of, slightly be, challenge public opinion only so far. But actually, that whole thing of them believing that if you maximise income, that became a core value, which then undermined the higher purpose. So from the get-go, there's been a kind of this mad contradiction, which is at the heart of how NGOs operate.
I think as a radical young accountant, which was my first training, I know I don't sound that one anymore, was I wanted to see the human in the balance sheet. How do you get the human? Because here's a resource, it's an asset. Into the balance sheet. And my boss looked at me and said, you're not going to last very long. Because no accountant will want to meet with you, which is true. Because when these people leave, how do you then depreciate that book? Let's say we can create it, because accountants know how to debit and credit things that don't exist. Let's say you create that. And then how do you, when Susan walks out, how do you evaluate it? How do you measure that? Because at the end of the day, we both agree there's got to be a dollar sign or a rand sign attached to that movement. With retirement, we can do that because there's all this equations that we've created. But with the human factor, how do we actually, the exit strategy, because another human is going to come and we need to evaluate that.
But SARS might decide to tax you on that asset.
Sorry?
SARS might decide to tax you on that asset.
Yes.
I'm just
Yes. That even makes it worse. Yes.
Most of the time, I think if you take two companies, one that is, put the human dignity, at the center of the business, and you take the other one which, consider individuals as just tools,
Resources,
and
tools.
they don't care if you die, if you get sick, etc. So the most important is that you produce, etc. I think it would be interesting to compare the two companies and see which one will perform better, and which one will perform sustainably. Yeah, in the business where there is no consideration of human, generally there are a lot of sabotage, and they can destroy your machines because you don't take them seriously. And in the other one, even if you do not achieve a high level of profit, but you can make profit sustainably on a long period, and you can trust. You're sure that you have a good production tool. But I think I've never done any of that research. But in Rwanda, we have the best company, which we have. It's a brewery company. I see how they treat their people, how they build up this teamwork, etc. How they take care of the education of the children, of the people, etc. And you can today. They are listed on the stock exchange of Rwanda, and their share is always climbing. Within 2 years, it has been multiplied by 5-10 times. Where the other ones, generally they remain there. People don't trust, because in the Brarirwa, it is called Brarirwa. Really, people have that teamwork. They believe in their company. Even if the managing director is not there, they will work until midnight to complete their program. So I think it's something that can be really. I think human dignity works for development. It works, and I think people really should go into it.
But it's interesting how it can get so muddled up. And whenever you talked earlier about this, the needs assessment approach to development, which was around for many years, and then it was commented on that this was actually a very undignified way to work, and oh dear, because this is kind of a deficit model. So what do we need to do? Let's have an asset-based model of development instead, which is equally ridiculous in a whole other range of modes, because it's like, for the past 10 years we go in and we do our needs assessment, and these poor communities all have to learn this ridiculous language that development people seem to speak, and learn the tricks of needs assessment, and then it's going to be, now you have to learn the language of asset-based assessment and development, and now you're going to play this set of tricks in order to access some magical set of resources, and then the next year it's going to be something about empowerment or something. The language keeps shifting, and there's a good intention, like asset-based development. Was it based on a good analysis of a system that was wrong? But it just had another false set of assumptions and an equally limited approach to development, because it was superficial. And because, again, it wasn't actually, I think the key thing, if you want to talk about development method or what's a good development method, to me the most important development method is deep listening before anything happens. But funders really aren't interested in listening. They don't think that's a development practice. I would say that's a fundamental development practice.
I think we should try to find a conclusion to this discussion.
Well, yes, it's 5 to 5.
Please, yeah.
You've just concluded, actually.
Can I make a short announcement, and because I might forget it tomorrow? Please know that our dear Emmanuel has offered to host this conference in 2015, so it's not next year but the year after, in May or June in Rwanda. And our dear Shweta has offered to host this conference in 2016 in February in Lahore, in Bangalore. Not in Lahore, in Bangalore. So I think we should acknowledge them for...
And I would like also to pay your attention once again to this mysterious envelope, and I would like to thank you for all those of you who already contributed to give some return on capital to our major shareholder. Just now we have only one
Modest return on
capital for this enterprise.
No profit, no profit.
I have already 2,320 rand inside here, which is very, very good. I thank you for your generosity, but maybe some of you miss the opportunity and are waiting to put something in or place it here again. Thank you very much.
Since I'm leaving, and I know that Evelyn is fan of picture like me. So is that okay that we take a group picture?
Oh, yes.
Because you proposed it yesterday.
Yes. So we